First tonight, to the memory of a man whose legacy is a reminder of the depth of this country's political history, a legacy we can all learn from. As we remember the great statesman, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who passed away 37 years ago this week, his memory becomes a powerful tool as Nigerians struggle to shape a more ethical political outlook. Chief Awolowo led the Action Group Party in the 1950s and 60s and was one of the founding fathers of this country, fighting relentless battles for Nigeria's independence and subsequently becoming the first premier of the Western region. Later, he became Nigeria's Minister of Finance, but not before spending some time in jail, accused of treason. A leading social democrat, he even had his own brand of politics known as Awoism, through which he laid out a comprehensive plan for economic and social development, especially in the Western region, and advocated for federalism as the only basis for equitable national integration. Here he is speaking to British television all those years ago.
Indeed, we are content to remain part of the Federation of Nigeria. We have no intention at all of severing connection with this great country.
Do you think that Nigerians are beginning to think of themselves now as one nation?
Indeed, they have begun to think of themselves as citizens of this great country. And all enlightened Nigerians are determined to ensure that Nigeria remains united.
But not all Nigerians are enlightened.
Not all Nigerians are enlightened, but the majority, quite a good number, are enlightened, and the majority are politically conscious.
And you can see the sharp intellect coming through there. Well, for more on all of this, I'm joined now in the studio by the Olusegun Awolowo, who is his grandson, and Mr. Awolowo himself has a lot of things to his name, but let's leave that aside and just focus on his grandfather. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. So a visionary leader, an intellectual powerhouse, an avowed federalist, a hero of the struggle against colonialism, who eventually became premier of the old Western region and later Minister of Finance. But to you, he was grandpa.
That's right.
How did you reconcile the two in your mind and in your recollection of him?
Yeah, thank you very much, Charles. Thank you for having me on. Indeed, this is the first time we're doing a personal thing. I've always come here on work.
Absolutely.
Yes, I grew up with Papa as a father and as a grandfather, and I never understood his greatness. I never did. You know, growing up, you know, at times when he even ventured to come to Igbobi College, where I was a student then, and the old school went ablaze, you know, and, you know, driving on the street sometimes. I just thought, okay, they must just like this chap, you know, that's it. So I never got aware of his greatness until pretty late,
right,
in life.
But that's actually good in a way, because it would have allowed you to establish, you know, a normal relationship with him without feeling intimidated by his
that I had, and I enjoyed tremendously. I was a very big beneficiary, even though many times I fought it. I tried to run away, you know, from him. That Papa was very strict.
Yeah.
He was a disciplinarian. He was, for him...
Well, he had to be disciplined, didn't he?
He was.
I mean,
for him, it was white and black.
Yeah.
There were no shades of gray.
Well, I mean, if you look, if you look at his background, which I'm sure you're much better aware of than we are, but I mean, you know, what he went through to have achieved what he achieved, he would have had to have been very disciplined.
Yeah, he was. He was. I remember once this is Papa's routine. He took us to on holiday. We went to America and the UK, because he always went to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota for his checkup. And before you qualify, of course, you must have done well, school, blah, 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 and take you. But the very first
I like
time.
that. So if you fail, there's no chance of you
going. The very
going
first
anywhere.
time we were to go, and my cousins and brothers and sisters, they always remind me of this. Papa said he didn't want us to disgrace him on British Caledonia. So we had to fly first from Ibadan to Lagos to be on the plane first. But I did not know that that was not the flight to London. So I told my mom, so she had bought me a turtleneck sweater,
Right.
a jacket and everything. So that's how I dressed to go from Ibadan to Lagos. Of course, I was sweating profusely throughout the flight, and my cousins never let me forget that area. But with Papa, you are going to America, he tells you are going to a buffet. He says, okay, the first thing you must realize is that your eyes are always more hungry than your stomach. And you can always go back.
Yeah.
So it will give you all those kind of lessons.
The do's and don'ts,
Do's and
basically.
don'ts that don't come and disgrace me here.
It was like a finishing school, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, practically. It ran that. I remember I went, they had just started doing these T-shirts where they print a logo or whatever you want on. Then it had just started. So I went shopping, and I got one. The logo was very nice. Inscription, I thought was okay. So we got back to the hotel, and Papa said, okay, what did you buy? What did you guys buy? So I showed him my T-shirt. The engraving on my T-shirt was life is sure, free, and easy.
Now that's the wrong thing to say to him.
Oh my God.
Or to advertise in his presence.
He said they should put me back on the flight. I was going back to Nigeria. My man, my grandmother, my aunties, who are not very was calling and begging and pleading, but needless to say, that was the end of the holiday for me, because I couldn't do anything again.
Yeah, no, of course.
And he managed me.
You'd crossed the line.
I'd crossed the line. And let me now tell you, much later, he now called me, I think, when you do well. But me, I was always in and out of do well. I was not consistent at all. I was not. So when you do well, then he called me one day to his office. He said, open that drawer. What he did was he seized everything I had bought on that trip. I bought a watch. He seized everything completely. So I had nothing coming back. So he said I should open that drawer. Do I now know that life is not free and easy? I said, yes, Papa, I know, sir. Yes, sir, I know, sir. He said, open that drawer. And I brought out, the T-shirt was there.
Right.
And my watch and everything, and he gave them back to me.
Well, that's a lovely, lovely story there. But I mean, we're looking at him. Obviously, you knew him after he had become what he became. But what was his background? Because he rose to the commanding heights of Nigerian politics. But I'm wondering whether that dramatic rise was simply as a result of sheer hard work on his part.
It was sheer hard work. Papa was a very deep thinker. He was an extremely deep, focused man. I remember when he was running for president, the thing logo was the man with a mission, blessed with a vision. And that's him. That's him. He had his vision on Nigeria, and he had the mission. He knew how to get there. He knew, for him, it really wasn't rocket science.
Very clear.
Yeah, it was very clear.
I mean, I remember actually seeing a video of him. I think he was campaigning for one of, it might have been the 1979 elections or something, and he got into this helicopter and landed somewhere, and there were all these people thronging around him and dancing and so on. And he just came with a very stern face and said to them, I'm not here to dance. So you can take all your songs and your singing and go, I'm here to deliver a message.
For him, politics was a selfless service. It was not a joking affair
Absolutely.
at all.
And that that kind of very disciplined, very focused attitude would only have come, as we were discussing earlier, from his background. I understand his father died when he was still quite young, in 1920, and he had to take on sort of menial jobs and become a houseboy.
When you read his book, My Early Life, because I now had to start reading many of his books. I tell you how
And
it
you've got quite a few books.
just to show the audience what I remember. I was then in the international school in Geneva, and my favorite subject was English literature. And we had an English teacher who had got me to fall in love with Martin Luther King, his speeches. Then I could recount, offered verbatim, the I Have a Dream speech, many of his speeches like that. So I came home on holiday once, and I was reacting it to Papa. I was telling him, I have a dream, you know, blah, 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 blah. So I told him all that, and he said, that's very interesting, that's very good. So the next day, he got me a Baptist in book and many things where some of, because Martin Luther King, of course, was a Baptist preacher.
Yes,
so most of his things were from the Baptist in book and the sermons. So he got them for me to look at, blah, blah, blah. So I still did not understand what that meant. But it was much later that I felt, okay, what Papa was trying to tell me was that, oh my God, I'm reading all this. You are not reading. You are going to memorize something else.
Martin Luther King.
You're going to memorize something else. And so that was quite...
very interesting. And of course, I mean, as we said, he had... you know, there were so many high points in his career. I mean, beyond the fact that he did spectacularly well in school, and this is not people saying, you know, oh, I did well in school. I mean, the evidence is there. And he then went on to the UK, University of London, and all the rest of it, and then got political. I mean, we'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm wondering when he made the decision to move into politics, because he was in Britain. He published a book titled Path to Nigerian Freedom, which focused on federalism. In fact, that was almost the Bible upon which Nigeria's constitution was then later sort of put together. Federalism as the best structure for Nigeria. That suggests considerable foresight into Nigeria's political future.
Oh, yes. But you must also understand that before that, he was a confederalist. And so he now changed to be a federalist. He adopted, he had many of his books had said, Thoughts on Nigerian Constitution, where I thought maybe the best thing was. But then he realized, went back to that, it must be federalism. That was best for Nigeria.
Because he gave
which is why,
you know, almost freedom to everybody to be able to be on their own turf, but also participate in the country. And I mean, that was, I mean, he then joined the movement, Nigeria to self-rule. And of course, Nigeria eventually became independent, but leading to that, he had formed the Action Group and became the first premier and so on. So a lot of high points in his career. But there were low points as well, weren't there? I mean, he was tried for treason and imprisoned. What were the circumstances that led to that?
Well, it was obviously politics. There was no way. He has answered all that in most of his publications. I remember when Papa was writing My March Through Prison, Adventures in Power. He only did 2 parts. It was to do 3. Remember, then I will have to proofread some of it for him. I will call me from my room. I'll go to his room. I will read it out to him. It will lay back. Sometimes I had to apply his eye drop for him, and he had shut his eyes. He said, read it out to me, read it out to me. And there was at one point where I said, Papa, I don't think this should be in your book because it's about a family member. This is what he wrote. And he said, no, that is the truth. That is what happened. That the minute you play and you twist facts, then you've lost the concept of your whole book. And so he documented everything carefully.
And what was his explanation for what happened in that sort of, the circumstances of that treason trial and imprisonment and so on?
Well, for him, it was a gang-up, according to him. And if you read his allocators, when he was being jailed, when the then Justice Shoemot told him that my hands are tied, but I must sentence you. And he said, before your sentence, this is what will happen. You know, that was, when you go back now and read that, allocators, and then see what exactly happened, you start to wonder what manner, what breed of a man is this? You know, he predicted it to the letter that this is what will happen. And then he went on to say that people might say, who are you to talk like this? What if you die? And he said, I will not die. The spirit of man knows no barriers and can be transmitted to any part of the world. You know, that's vintage Awo talking
very
to you.
Profound.
Yeah, very profound. And he survived. In the end, he survived it. Many others did not.
And of course, he eventually emerged from that low point. He bounced back. I mean, he became the Minister of Finance.
Yeah, to General Gowon. General Gowon indeed released him from prison and asked him to serve in the government as what you call vice president now. So that's what it was. Yeah,
right.
But all true. You know, I see Papa as never at the end of towards the end of his life. I think he recognized that he will not be president of Nigeria again, but he knew that he had accomplished so much more. And I think he died with that satisfaction.
And
he wasn't bitter that I did not become president. It looked like that, you know, towards, but being a deep philosophical person, he realized that. And his last birthday is what he said was, what I'm actually celebrating now is the eminence of my eventual transition, you know, and that was just so profound. It was deep. I was one of the MCs at the birthday ceremony, and I was started joking about it that, okay, when Papa comes back into the afterlife, he said he's going into afterlife. There is an afterlife after this. And he asked for the book, that if anybody could get him that book, he's looking for it. And I said, oh, maybe in this afterlife, Papa will come back as my own child, and I will now be disciplining him. You know, I made
you fantasized about
but
that.
The next day, you know, asked him that, Papa, really, what do you mean by this? But he now saw, I'm sure, my aunties, my uncles, you know, his own children, well, they must have gone to say, Papa, what is this? What are you saying? You know, so he downplayed it for us. But he died the next year.
Well, I mean, just to very briefly, because the time is galloping forward, he played a role in the Biafra-Nigeria war, didn't he? How would you describe his role in that war?
You see, the good thing about Papa, you don't need to describe his role, because he had described it himself.
On the Nigerian Civil
On the Nigerian
War.
Civil
So what did
War.
he say in there? Because many people haven't read it.
People should read it, really. I remember when there was some problem about this, somebody interviewed me, I said, just go and read what Papa said about the Civil War. And this is now written and compiled by MCK Ajulichukwu, the late MCK Ajulichukwu, who worked with him, you know. And he went to say, again, the most accusation that won was that did Awolowo declare that starvation is a legitimate instrument of war? Yeah. And this is MCK Ajulichukwu writing. that Papa, in his usual frankness and truth-telling characteristic, he admitted making a similar statement, but added that it only referred to those actually fighting in the Civil War.
Right.
In other words, the soldiers.
It wasn't the little babies and children.
He maintained that it would have been preposterous of him to allow food to reach his potential killers in a period of war. But he will never have supported or propagated the starvation of civilians, particularly women, children, and the aged. So
nevertheless, yes.
he answers it. That's so much
I see
more.
what you mean. I'd like to actually get a copy of that book. But nevertheless, at the end of the war, he came up with the idea of giving £20 to every single person every Biafran.
Chief Awolowo disclosed that at the end of the hostilities, he, as a Federal Commissioner for Finance, cost 900,000 naira in form of rehabilitation fund to be sent to the East Central State monthly without the prior authorization of the Executive Council, which some months later was obliged to endorse his action respectively. It was certain that the Igbo members of the Federal Executive Council during that period will confirm this disclosure as being true. So he, Papa answered everything with his book. He's the most documented.
But I mean, you'll bear in mind that there are people from that part of the country who had a lot of money in the bank.
Yes,
and they ended up getting £20.
That was at the beginning. But remember, everybody also got their property.
Right,
as well,
back
in Lagos
eventually.
And everything.
Eventually. Although there was a big song and dance about abandoned property and so on. But before we go, I mean, the main reason we actually were here was to remember someone who made a tremendous difference in taking this country forward, and that person happened to be your grandfather. And you wrote this personal, brilliant ode to him. Would you care to read some of it? And after you've read it, you can tell us what moved you to write it.
Okay, let me start with the movement first. I am in the process of writing my own book now. I'm working on 2 books. And the first one, my autobiography, is titled Judged by a Son Name. Yeah, because I've come to realize,
I can imagine it
throughout
hangs
my
over
life,
your head, doesn't it?
that name just dangles, and and I realize and know that it's not mine. Many years on, that Papa, how do we live? How do we meet up? We can never step into your shoes. We can never fill your shoes. And his answer was like, no, you go, you carve your own niche.
Yes, absolutely.
The name will help you. If you go somewhere,
Yep.
say you're Olusegun Awolowo, that's which Awolowo. Say you're that Awolowo, just, let him come in.
Yes.
Now, when you get in there,
it's up to you.
It's up to you. And you speak trash and nonsense, then they'll just send you out and they'll say, oh, what a pity that look at this. But when you speak well, when you tell well, then so that's a chip of the old block.
That is true.
And that is what I always. There's an Irish proverb that says that no matter how tall your grandfather is, you have to be tall yourself.
Yeah.
You can't rely on his own
You've got to
height.
stand tall.
You have to.
Even if you're not physically tall.
So that was the process of writing, and I thought, okay, let me pen and ode to Papa on this day.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's hear it.
Okay. It goes, in the quiet of my thoughts, I see your face. 37 years have slipped away, yet your presence lingers on day by day. With wisdom deep as the ocean's vast, you steered our ship through the tempest past. In your footsteps, I learned to tread, guided by the words you once said. With courage and grace, Papa, you led the way, inspiring generations to seize the day. Forever remembered, forever adored.
That's very, very
It goes
moving.
on, but in fact, I think
but we've
I
got
saw
it on
it
the
at,
screen there, so some people
I
have
didn't
been able to see
I
it.
saw it at on the back page of This Day Today.
Well, listen, I want to
use it.
thank you very much indeed for taking the time to
Yeah.
come in and sharing these memories with
Let me
us.
just conclude by
Yes.
saying that we, of course, the Awolowo Foundation run by my auntie, Dr. Tokuma Awolowo Dosunmu, is doing well to propagate all the ideals of Papa and to keep it on. But we must continue. And now Papa, before he died, he actually met 19 of his grandchildren. And now he has almost 40 great-grandchildren.
That's remarkable.
And 2 great-great-grandchildren. And so everybody is bent on defending, promoting,
and taking the name forward.
Taking the name forward.
Well, that's
so
the way it
not
ought
only
to
me.
be. That's the way it ought to be. Thank you very much indeed. Olusegun Awolowo is the grandson of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, the great sage. And of course, Olusegun himself has been the head of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council and is also currently the Executive Secretary of the National Action Committee on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.